The current rhino poaching crisis has been a really traumatic, awful one to deal in. Not only has there been the poaching crisis with rhinos being defaced, shot, stats rising every single day, there have also been some very difficult and unpleasant debates around the horn trade. It hasn't been a nice thing to be involved in. And the Rhino Orphanage and what we represent and what we're doing here is the positive, compassionate, caring side of it. It's sort of light in the tunnel.
We officially opened the orphanage on August the 7th. The fixtures and fittings have now got to go into the orphanage. It's got specialist care rooms, it's got an intensive care unit, it's got offices, it's got staff quarters, purpose-built with the sole aim of rehabilitating orphaned rhinos.
The Rhino Orphanage's main focus is to give the traumatised calves from poaching a quiet, calm, specialised place in which to recover, and then the main aim is to handle those calves in a way that ensures they can go back into the wild, that they can become self-sustaining, free-living animals, and in that way contribute to conservation. Very often hand-reared animals will not interact normally with other wild animals. They may have problems rearing their own young. And why this is different is there will be no commercialization. There is no payment to be allowed to come and work with a rhino or touch a rhino. And the human contact and the human handlers will be limited, and we've designed the facility and put in place the protocols that we can deal with anything from a newborn premature calf right the way through to an 18-month or 2-year-old calf that may have bullet wound injuries. We have facilities that are fairly small and intensive for intensive care cases where we can provide temperature control, humidity control and very intensive nursing, and then progressively working out through a range of facilities to 480, 500 hectares. And this little boy is actually not from a poaching. We suspect the mother's milk dried up, and he was incredibly hungry, so he started eating sand and high fibre, which caused gastric problems, and that resulted in a prolapse. And it was a recurrent prolapse, so it kept recurring in spite of medical attention. So it was decided to move him to Orphanage, where we could have surgical teams and veterinary specialists on hand. And we were very lucky, we were able to move an entire care and nursing team down to Orphanage. So they provided the veterinary expertise and we continued with the rearing and the care and the mothering. Rhino calves have a very intense, very close bond with the mother for at least 18 months. They suckle for 18 months and it's a very close one-on-one bond. They need that security, they need the tactile care, they need to feel that they've got a mother. So it's finding the balance between providing appropriate human surrogate mothering and mothering that is over-commercial or for humans' sentimental interest. So we try very hard to find the balance.
After preparing the bottles, I normally take over from one of the girls who've been sitting with him for the night. And then he wanders about for a bit, he has some playtime, and usually from 11 he tapers off and becomes more quiet, has some nap time in the sun and goes about his business. And then of course he gets his bottle roughly every 1.5 to 2 hours on demand from him. And we do a bit of cleaning when he's calmer, entertain him. He needs all that exercise and learning about a thing as simple as a log, getting used to the smells and preparing him for basically when we take him for walks. He needs that constant attention as well.
We are really not very suitable surrogate mothers. We're not very large, we're not as robust as rhino, and we don't fully understand what a rhino needs or what a rhino mother gives. So we try in our own way to provide him with what the mother would be giving him in the wild. He has a personality in between that and is being naughty and playing and investigating and exploring. And at the same time you're trying to pull all the bits and pieces together, making sure that the bottles are made ahead of time so that he doesn't have to wait for his bottle, that the bottle is the right temperature, otherwise he gets colic, that he isn't eating sand, making sure that there are blankets available when he wants his blankets, and then in between remembering that there are medications that have to be given at a certain time, that he might not want his medications or to have his wounds washed or his bottom cleaned when we feel it needs to be done. So it's a challenging and a fun process. I think people see rhinos sort of these big grey prehistoric beings that have very little personality and very little emotional feeling, but in fact they have very individual personalities, they have a sense of humour, they are able to feel incredible distress and pain, and are very aware of what is going on in their environment, in spite of the fact they don't show it. They can actually be described as the stoics of the animal world. And I think if people had an insight into the personality that these little guys have, they are sentient beings, that they may have a very, very different feeling about conserving them and how important it is.
I think the hardest thing to do is keep your emotions under control for the well-being of the animal, you know, not just constantly reminding yourself this is a wild thing and it needs to go back, and you have to distance yourself, you know, in a way not to become too attached. I think the most rewarding thing would be to see him back in his natural habitat in the wild, where he's supposed to be, happy with a few girlfriends and a few children, hopefully.
It's been incredibly emotionally draining on all of us involved. It's been a huge challenge. Up until a week ago, when this tutu was taken out and the prolapse remained in and didn't recur, we didn't know whether he was actually going to make it long term. At the same time, whilst it's emotionally draining, there are those special moments that you have where you bond with him, that you share things with him, and being a part of the process is in itself incredibly positive. The process going forward with him is now to increasingly introduce him to natural things in a natural environment, to reduce the artificiality and the intensity of his treatment. The minute the orphanage is ready and that last fitting is put on the wall, to move him into a boma down at the orphanage, and we're all working as hard as we can to get that done quickly.
People are almost sanitised by hearing a number, and the number is the number of rhino that have been poached every year. Well, we want to turn that round. We want to start now with the number 1. The number 1, it's the first rhino saved at the world's first dedicated baby rhino orphanage. But 1 becomes 2, then it'll be 3, then it'll be 4 and 5 and 6. And once we get to a stage whereby our first rhinos are released into the wild, then those rhinos will have more rhinos, and that number will go up 10, 12, 20, 50, 100. So we want to change the tide now and show that we can save the species. We can do something very specific. We can raise, rehabilitate and release back into the wild in a safe environment, rhino. Because otherwise, 7, 10, 15 years, there won't be any. So now's the time to change, and today, number 1.